How many of you are familiar with the concept of Netflow and what it might or might not be? Or is this something new that most people haven't really talked about before? You know it. Yeah, I know you. So it's been around for quite some time, actually. Cisco introduced it in their router products back in 1990. And now the most common version is 5. Their most recent version is version 9. And it took from 1990 to version 9 for the Internet Engineering Task Force to decide, hey, this looks like it's going to be a good idea. Maybe we should get on board with that. And they did IP fix. So it's basically their version of 9 that has RFC, a couple RFCs going on there. What is it? It collects your IP traffic as it crosses an interface and then organizes it into things that are called flows. So you take all that traffic, and basically for Cisco, it's a unidirectional sequence of packets that share these certain categories. So one, they have to have come across the same interface. You can't have a flow that comes from 2 different routers. That isn't within their concept. Now you possibly would have a download of a file that would come across 2 different routers, depending on your setup, but that wouldn't constitute a flow. Your source and your destination addresses, the protocol that's being used, the ports, source and destination, and if you're using a portless protocol, it just defaults to 0. On the destination side, though, they do use the port to identify the code for the ICMP. And so if you know that, someone was just talking about ICMP and all of the ports, you get a ping is a 2? 8.
0 for echo reply?
Yes. And so you can actually see which the replies are coming back from that, so you can get information about what type of packets came in. And then again, your type of service that was being provided. And generally, that's also across a time period. A flow wouldn't last more than probably, well, the time period between packets in a flow isn't going to last more than maybe even a second. But you can have flows of data that are very big, and they can last for a pretty large start and stop time. As long as you're recording the back and forth movement of packets across a flow, then it'll generally be considered a flow. There are some built-in time frames, so it will actually swap and just start recording it in another flow, basically, just so that it saves space and it doesn't, your router has limited memory. You don't want a download of some torrent movie that you're illegally doing to take down the rest of the network. So they can break that into flows, things along those lines. Why won't you work? What kind of data is in a flow? Well, it really is all that metadata about what traffic is. What interfaces it crossed, what were the timestamps when it started and when it ended, how many packets were involved in that, and then how many bytes did that represent. You get, as we said, the types and the codes, so you can get ICMP codes in there. You can get, of course, your IP addresses and your ports that are used. You can also get flags. So if it's a SYN packet, those flags will be set. You can actually query based on, hey, did I get a 3-way handshake? Did I get a SYN, an ACK, and a SYN-ACK? And you can run through and you can see. There are even some that will give you some state that describes whether it was a full connection or a partial connection. You can see the reset flag so that you know that maybe the packet came in but then just got rejected and got sent a reset as a response. You can even, in the newer versions, have information about your next hops. So it will record where it's going, and then that can be used as it gets to the next hop to determine where it came from and what's happening. And then it also has your autonomous system information. Some of the tools will even go and do a geo lookup, and they'll give you the country code that might be relatively accurate, because those are always hit and miss from time to time. But it is good information to have and to look at. We actually do reports on Flow that show how many Chinese IP addresses and Russian IP addresses are trying to brute force accounts at Virginia Tech. So it was pretty much done by Cisco, but everybody said, hey, this is a really good idea. Because initially, what it gave them were statistics about how their network was performing. So it wasn't even a security-related concept. It was, how many packets are we doing? How many bytes are going? Are we dropping packets? What's going on with the network? And this was an easy way to strip that metadata that they could run reports across and see how they were performing. And so all of the major vendors have come up with something along those lines. They've come out either with a V4 or a V5 or a V9 version, and JFlow, CFFlow-D, NetStream, CFlow, RFlow, AppFlow, SFlow. There are dozens of them out there. Most of them are vendor specific. So you can't say, hey, I want to use CFlow on a Juniper router. You kind of have to go with what Juniper's done, and they'll have all the commands built in, and you can use it in those manners. But one thing you have to keep in mind is that our network bandwidth is exploding, and so everybody said, it's okay. We don't need to know exactly how many bytes are going by. We need to know, generally speaking, how well we're performing. So let's just sample data. So let's take one packet for every 500 packets, okay, 5,000 packets. Or let's say in any given period of time, we're going to take a packet from this. So every 5 milliseconds, we're going to take a packet. So if you're looking at Netflow and you're trying to do something more security related with it, you really need to be aware of this, because you're going to get an incomplete picture of what's happening if you're doing sampled data. So, and generally, that's a negotiation between you and your network team, because it does put a performance degradation on the router, because it is doing something for every packet, but there is a lot of value. Netflow's kind of laid out with a 3-step piece. You have an exporter. That's generally your router or your switch. Well, not your switch, but your router or your firewall will export that data, and it will put those flows together and then send them out across a UDP stream, and then you need a collector to receive it. And so it sits there listening on a port. It takes in the data that comes, and then it stores that in whatever manner you set up. So if you've got a terabyte of storage on this drive, and you've got it in this folder, and you want 5 minutes of data, and then each file rolls to the next 5 minutes, and then you zip those, and then you copy them here, and you do that's all done on your collector, and it deals with, again, receiving all that and storing that data, and is usually a software component. So where your exporter is most often a hardware component, the flow collector is generally a software tool. And then once you store all that data, you have basically an analysis suite that you can go through and use tools to run across the data that you have saved. You can do it over live data as well, but generally you're going to go back and look historically what happened. And the thing that we do with this a lot is, okay, we know somebody downloaded malware. Where did they download it from? We don't have the logs from the machine, so let's look at the network and see where they went. Oh, it was a data stealing piece of malware, so let's see if there was this huge file transfer after they hit the malware, and then we can see, oh yeah, you absolutely had data exfiltration. So those are, there are a number of open source components that end up getting involved in this, and they have different levels of being part of that that kind of 3-component. Silk was done, and it supports Netflow 5 and 9, and basically it sits as the collector and the analysis tools. And so it sits there as that software component that's the collector and reads the data that comes in, and you can point pretty much anything at it and it will read it. I think it has support for most of the major flow headers and can decode those and actually store them. And then you can use their tools to do that. NFDump is a pretty standard tool set to collect again and then to read those files. FlowD, NTop. NTop is a traditional tool that will show you your network, and it has the ability to extract some of that data out as well. So there are a lot of ways, and if you go and do a search for Netflow, you're going to get a list of probably this big of people who are doing Netflow in some way, shape, or form. The last one on here is what we use at Virginia Tech. It's Argus, and it was developed, well, that's the next slide. But it is an open source, and it runs on Linux, and it differs slightly from most of the Netflow tools in the fact that it is a collector, but it doesn't act as a collector from your hardware devices. It actually receives a span or a tap of all your network data and then extracts out the same information that Netflow is doing. So in our circumstance, we weren't able to offload the Netflow portion so that we could receive that. So we had access to spans of data, and we were able to use this to pull the same kind of information. And actually what you find is that because it sees the entire packet, it sees all the traffic, you can actually tell it to extract more information than just that traditional metadata. You can actually go in and pull, like it has a mode that does full packet capture, but you can say, hey, I want the first 20 bytes of any HTTP request so that I can pull the URL out and I can see where they were actually going. Because that's always one of the problems with the cloud. The cloud has all these IP addresses, but you never really know where anybody's going. They could be on the same IP address and could be looking at My Little Pony, or they could be looking at something even worse. But the current version of this is 3.0.8, and Carter Bullard created this at least 15 years ago. His company, QoSient, develops it, and they make it available. It is used in a lot of higher education. Unfortunately, when we go to talk to vendors, they know what Netflow is, but they don't know what these other products do. And so it's usually, oh, I've never heard of that before. But then you go, there's some great education. EDUCAUSE is a great resource within education, and it's like, oh yeah, we use that all the time. As a matter of fact, if any of you are familiar with Security Onion, they use Argus to do packet collection or Netflow collection behind the scenes within that. So it's used in a lot of products, and it's a part of things that are there. So it should be something that has some good information. Again, that 3-piece component, this is actually slightly different. The Argus server component, it is the exporter, and it is part of a collector. So again, it's pulling data straight from the wire. So it has to strip out all those 7 components that make up a flow, and then put those together and generate the flows themselves. The Argus client, it kind of does a 2-step as well, because it also works partly as the collector and then as the analysis tools. So you may collect data straight off the wire with the server component and then save it to disk, and then using your RA client tools, you'll actually parse that out into something that might be more meaningful than just having a lump of data, and then you can kind of go across that. It can be installed on most Linux distributions. They have it as a package. You can apt-get Argus. You can think EPL has Argus in its repository, so you can yum it. But you have to be careful what versions are there. A lot of those packages are old and they're the 2.x version, and it is less stable than the 3 series. And although Kali, interestingly enough, has a fully functioning and operating Argus implementation, which is another reason that we're using it as the live CD, because we can install it from source and we can start it using standard tools, and it puts it into var log, and so it will rotate it every night when your log rotate happens. And so it's pretty nice. So I do want to do some looking at some data. That was that bundle that I sent the link out, and everybody can actually go through it if we want, and we can use that. But it's up to you guys. So that's out there if you want to download it. Are there any questions kind of about what it is and maybe why you might want it before we move forward?
What kind of hardware do you need to run Argus? Is it pretty intensive? Is it lightweight?
It is very lightweight, actually. The biggest things that you're going to run into are this writing to disk. So if you're doing a lot of traffic analysis, so if you've got big links, you're going to want well laid out storage partitions, be that using something like your RAID 10 with a couple different drive stacks that you're writing across, the DFS, something like that. That's really your biggest bottleneck.
Or writing to like iSCSI and SAN.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Absolutely. Because you're trying to write, you're there. You'll see there is a delay in how it processes, but you want to write as fast as you can so that your Ethernet buffers or your network card buffers don't get overfill. If they overfill, then they'll drop packets. And so you want to be careful to be able to write fast enough. So, and in fact, we do some 10 gig links that we monitor, and each of them runs at 5 gig, and we separate it so we load balance at 5. So we know the cards are rated for 10 gig, and they're actually sniffer cards, so they have extra buffer so that they capture, just so that we don't drop those packets. We need to get better on the back end of writing to disk, but right now we've done pretty good with it. But we do have a project coming up where we're going to be monitoring a 100 gig link, and that's going to change kind of the way we have to do a lot of stuff. Just the speeds are so large and there's so much there. So that's, you're not going to run it on an 8 gig laptop and do your full network, but it does really well. The place that you want processor and you want your memory especially is in your tools, because your tools are actually going to pull and start to investigate within a binary file format. And it was something I didn't mention is that Argus, when it writes it as this binary blob, and then the RA tools are the ones that go in, decode that blob, and then pull the data out of it. So it's in its writing and getting that out there, it's a very fast format, but it is a whole lot slower to pull it out when you're trying to extract data.
And the idea is that the tool is flushing as much data to disk as it can without it, and so it's doing that as fast as it can so it doesn't lose anything.
Yeah. So when you get to your analysis side, you want to look a little bit heavier on the hardware there than even on the collector, because it's it's collecting. It's just sitting there taking data and writing it to disk.
So ideally, would you not want to capture data on a single system and then do your analysis on separate systems where you don't have to worry so much about?
Yeah, and again, it's going to depend on how much you're monitoring, but so our basic setup and our idea is we have our sensors which write to disk, and then every 10 minutes we roll a file, so we have a new file, and then every hour we replicate that to basically a warm storage, and then at warm storage we use that to run our tools across and to do analysis. So that gives us basically an hour that we don't have in that data set. But if we absolutely have to get something from right now, we can go to the sensor and run one query, which isn't so bad.
Right.
But if I'm trying to do a month worth of data, I don't want that on the sensor. I want
Yeah.
that somewhere that can handle
If it crashes, you don't want it to crash your collection.
Well, and the processes will crash.
Yeah.
So the RA process will run out of memory. But yeah, you don't want that happening on a sensor, because then you hope that your analysis tool crashes before your process crashes.
Right.
So, that's the hope.
What sort of calculus went into doing 10-minute capture windows to a file? Was that based on, we looked at our max throughput and at 10 minutes that's this file size, that's a good enough blob, or
So
was it just swag it and hey look, it worked? It's never broken.
Other people did it at 10 minutes. It seemed reasonable.
Fair enough.
There is a pretty active community of people who use it. Their mailing list is pretty good. There's a wiki off their website, and they talk in one space about how you want to manage that data. And really, when it gets to size, you get really interesting. We have two 10 gig links that run about 5 to 6 gig a second, pretty much throughout the day. And that generates a binary directory for a day of about 65 to 80 gigs.
It's not
So it's not horrible until you want to see what happened yesterday.
Sure.
And then you're like, oh, wait. So breaking
you
it
need
down.
that full 128 gigs of memory.
One of the nice things about it that we'll see here in a moment is when you're using your analysis tools, you can point it at one file, or you can point it at an entire directory, or you can point it at 2 files, or you can use wildcards to specify the files. So with a 10-minute chunk, if we really know exactly when it happened, we can just run it on that one file, and it won't take nearly as long as running for an entire day. And in fact, we had a student in one of our labs write a process, a multi-threading process, basically, that a script that spawns various instances of the RA tools to do breakdown and extracts, because otherwise it would just take, really would take forever with a single threaded process to pull memory out. But again, that's just with the data size that we have. If you have a 1 gig link coming in to your organization, then that's easy and very doable with what's there, and it doesn't take too long to look over. Yes.
So how does this compare to like a TCP dump and Wireshark stuff?
So what you're getting is basically header data. So you're getting the IP addresses, the ports, you're getting the type of packet that it was, how many packets were involved, and the size that was involved in it. You're not generally going to get any data that's part of the packet.
Is that because Argus doesn't have the capability, or you just don't set it up to do that?
Well, Argus has the capability to do that. We don't set it up to do that. Once you start capturing data, your storage goes through the roof.
Right.
So
Okay, that explains the file sizes you stated earlier. It's just headers, okay.
It's 70 gigs of header information.
Right.
So, yeah. So no, you're not going to be able to go in and reconstruct everything that happened as part of a communication. But what you can do is look and see where they went, where else they were at the time that something happened, and you can start to put a picture together of what was going on with it.
You can see the data was exfilled, but not reconstruct which data was exfilled.
That is part of it. And it's very difficult without actual packet data to say this Excel spreadsheet was the one that was exfiltrated. But what you can do is say for the 40 minutes after they got popped by this amount of data left the system, and as far as our legal responsibility for reporting or for giving credit monitoring to somebody that was involved in that, that is a close enough that it probably was exfiltrated. And so within those reporting laws, we would then do credit monitoring for all those individuals and so on and so forth. I mean, that's given that if the file wasn't encrypted on disk.
To go back to your point though, the drawing a little bit more distinction between this and Wireshark. So, I mean, Wireshark's got a lot of bloat on it, right? I mean, it's made to be a GUI tool that's sort of friendly to dive in and start slicing and dicing. This thing is just flying gas can. Let's grab the packets, slap them on the disk, and then we'll figure out how to cut them up later. So, you in situations where Wireshark would drown in the data that's coming in and wouldn't be able to capture packets and such, this guy will just keep on drinking and write to the disk. Granted, huh?
Sorry, is it cutting off?
Provided you're not writing to like a 5400 RPM disk, because I promise you, you will hit. It's surprising how your Ethernet card can overwhelm a spinning disk, but throughput's not that high.
Is Netflow expensive to turn on? Like, is it pretty resource intensive?
I don't honestly know. I would say in general it isn't, because it may already be turned on in your organization and going and feeding somewhere that your network team doesn't know, or they do know and they just don't tell
What
anybody.
tends to get expensive is that you can't replicate it infinitely, right? So if your networking team's already doing something with it, then you're kind of out of luck, because most of the time you don't get to like list all the sources you want to send this Netflow data to. You can send it to source or send it to destination, and that's it. Like, that's your collecting point. And if the networking team is collecting that specific data,
Yeah.
But as far as like processing itself, generally not.
I've never encountered a situation where it causes a disruption to service. What you will see first, because basically they've engineered the gear such that that's the lowest priority process it's got. So if it gets in a situation where it's running out of resources and has to sling data, it's going to sling the data first, and you're just not going to have, you're going to go blind for that period. But again, I don't know that I've ever seen a switch get that, like,
You haven't
short
had
of-
your most recent denial of service attack.
Granted, okay, all right. So outside of like really extreme circumstances where like all of the devices on your network are simultaneously trying to ping all of the other devices on your network every 13 seconds, I've never encountered a scenario with normal network traffic where it was a problem. But yeah, I mean, in a denial of service scenario, the switch may go down. Well, it was going to go down anyway.
So, any other questions? Does anybody want to see packets? Or
Yes,
partial-
packets.
Partial pieces of packets?
Pieces and parts of packets.
So, I don't know where I'm going. Did anybody need help extracting the source file?
Yeah.
Sure, just don't worry about it.
Yes?
I don't know what I'm doing from the beginning.
Did you download it?
Yeah, actually. Ralph's helping.
Ralph to the rescue.
Can you see that? Yes. Root is the username, TOOR, which is the reverse, is the password on the base Kali install.
Are any of these, by the way, the exploit on?
No, I didn't have an opportunity to look at that. for this.
After playing with this, it's worth your time to go and download those files that JTake posted and just have a look at the exploit in progress. And if nothing else, it will allow you to look at a real world communication and like pick out what's been happening. And again, if you have questions, shoot emails out to the listserv.
So that command,
Tar!
are we good or do?
No, my computer's getting down.
Oh, okay.
Tell the truth. Did you look up the tar flags or did you know them off the top of your head?
I do enough extracting that I know those. What I always do though, when I have to make one, is I put out how I break one apart and then go back and go, oh yeah, it's that flag I have to change. Cause,
Choose the extra C. Wow.
yeah. Cause I do this so much more often than I make them by hand.
Right. The XKCD on tar flags. You know which one I'm talking about?
I don't think I do.
It's the first panel is a bomb, and basically says enter a properly formatted tar flag in 15 seconds, and the dude looks up. We're so sorry. We're all gonna die because I can't remember tar flag.
So, I called these the RA tools. It's,
Rah.
Read Argus is kind of the RA, and then there are a number of other ones that are part of it. If you do RA at a command line and hit tab, it's going to pull a bunch of stuff, and half of it is not Argus related. But you can start to see some of the patterns.
Dumb question. What's for anonymize?
Well, if you'll give me a moment.
Skip to the good stuff.
Actually, that.
You just run the same command you did.
It is an Argus command. If you do man on it, it will tell you that it's part of Argus. And did you need the command again?
No, we're good. It's
Okay.
doing something weird.
It actually will read an Argus stream, and then you give it some parameters, and it will anonymize the data that's in it and the ports that are in it, depending on how you set it up. Oftentimes, you want the ports to stay the same so that you can look. But if I were to take traffic from the Virginia Tech network and want to use it as an example, we would run it through RA Anonymize, and we would anonymize both the source and the destination IP addresses so that you wouldn't be able to take it back to something that is knowable or someone who is knowable.
Right.
So it's a way to anonymize that so you can share data in a safe manner.
Is there a use case for this tool that isn't making examples?
Of this?
Yeah. The anonymized? Honestly, don't get sidetracked on this, just a point of curiosity.
For making examples, or?
Is there a use case other than building example data sets?
Well, so that is sharing with you guys. If we had a researcher doing network traffic who wanted to see what is normal traffic, what does
Fair
normal
enough.
traffic look like, so that they can inject anomalies into it and then try and see if their algorithms will identify those anomalies, you would want it anonymized. Because there's no good reason for them to know where the traffic came from.
Yeah.
It's good practice.
Yep, whenever I do a RA, I'm not getting to the.
Yeah. Just because you probably want it installed.
Oh, yeah. Install.
See, I forgot to print out the one piece of
Alright.
paper that had my step-by-step.
Oh. So you don't have any years of
Yeah, Argus dash.
So, do an apt update.
Install.
You were in the right place.
Apt-get install.
Far left.
Sorry.
Scroll over. I can go up.
So,
Argus.
it's apt or apt-get install, and this is all lowercase, Argus-server.
Oh, well, okay. I installed client too.
Well, client will ask, or server will ask for the client tools to be installed, and you just take all the dependencies.
So what you did is still fine. Because literally I did apt-get install Argus asterisk.
Well, there's that too.
All the Argus things.
There's never just one way to do it. You can actually go to their website and you can download the components and you can configure, make install them. And that goes pretty well too. But the really nice thing when this gets installed, so we're not currently running Argus here. There are no processes that are running. You want to start it. So if you are old school and want to do it the old school way, you can do service Argus start, and it will convert it into this format. and it will start it for you. And now you'll see we do have a process that's running. In var log, you'll notice there is an Argus directory.
You're fired. From life.
Well, me, someone will hang out. He said.
You'll get this Argus out file, and that shows that you have an actively running process, and if you look, it keeps going in size. And while we're here, the most basic way that you can run RA, again, read Argus. The -R is to read from a file. You'll find a lot of these switches are very similar to a TCP dump style. A lot of them mean some of the same things. A lot of them don't. They mean something that's absolutely different. So I refer to running man across that, or the -help, and it will give you specific options, which look like a nightmare mess to look at, but it really isn't too bad. Again, an R, and then the file that you want to read, and it's going to pull out data and give it to you. And yeah, the fields are a little bit wide. Anybody having problems with it getting installed? Okay. What you got?
Saying they can't find Argus.
Did you do Argus star or Argus -server?
So everybody who voted for Shake It Off to be Tim's walk-on song, you earned that. Who did you think that was?
I'm gonna go kick him off.
CXFB. Unzip with a Z, extract with an X, F is the file name, and B is, be verbose about it. And then the file name, so tar ZXFB, and then the file name. So do an up arrow. No, on the actual
Basically,
up arrow
restart
on the
disk is
keyboard. That'll go back through history. Do a space and then the file name. And then you can actually tab complete. So if you hit tab from now,
Yeah, you say
you're in the same directory.
Press a key. I think it's great that I can basically.
Actually, it's not Argus. It's 2017.
Browse the Windows directory. I can replace the accessibility files in Windows with a command line. Reboot the computer, press the shift key 5 times, get a command.
Do the up arrow.
Log on.
So it'll go back up in history and then hit 2 bypasses. There you go. And hit enter.
And
That'll
it doesn't
extract
take
the
this.
But you would probably.
Usually doesn't take. Yeah, you probably just press the button.
So apt install, and then Argus with a star, I think. And then it should go out.
Probably did.
Yeah.
Are you on the where? Try do the up arrow, go back up in history, and then remove the star and do a dash circle.
We've got action. Not the battery died.
So I think it was looking for some additional things. Anyone else?
Waiting.
Maybe? Or we're waiting?
So, yeah.
It will at that.
Kinda quick. Was there a light for power?
Looks like you're trying
2 minutes before go. So it was the new one.
Oh, it's doing updates. It was asleep.
Bad Ralph.
Yeah.
So is there like a nice interface for reading these captures, or is there command line?
It is by and large command line only. There are some ways that you can look at that data, and those include things like importing it into something like Elk or into something like Splunk, where you can look at that. There are a couple of GUI tools that have been kind of created that have seemed to have lost favor, and by and large, most of your Netflow tools are all command line. Most of the people that are dealing with it are using it from the command line to do queries. We import large flows into our Elk stack so that we can see if something big is happening, so that we can get like spikes. So we'll get a spike on a day at a certain time, and we'll go and we'll dig into what that is and try and figure out what happened.
Gotcha. Because this just seems like something that would be a lot nicer visualized, like in top. It's really nice. It's really easy to go see in, like, where's all my traffic going, like what's the split
Yes.
up and all that.
And
like this, I'm just a bunch of lines on the screen.
And that's where a lot of the tools come in handy. So if we look at that first one, the Argus-1, there's going to be a lot of stuff going on there. And it's really, really difficult to, I don't know what's happening. I don't know, there's a bunch of lines. They do have certain things that you can do. So one of these RA hosts, it will actually go out and parse through all that data and then tell you what IP addresses are involved.
Okay.
So here, you'll notice we have 150.10, 20, and 30, and they were all talking to 5. So right off the bat, 5 was my target that I ran all these and I was collecting data on, and these others were points that I looked at. I said you can look at one file or you can look at a lot of files. If you want a whole directory, you use a capital R, and then I'm in that directory, so a period says give me everything that's there. It'll take a little bit longer to run, but we're going to have a little bit better results. Now we've got 254, well, no, that's a 254. But there's a lot more IP addresses that were involved in this. And what you'll find,
So when I use RA host, it just lists, it doesn't tell you who you're talking to, it's just a long list of IP addresses. I guess that's because they're all talking in this device, or?
you did it on the packet captures that were there?
Yeah. Or not on the packet captures, but on the Argus, the capture that it's actively doing. It's just,
So you just did basically, what you did the log, that print off.
Like that?
yeah.
More or less.
And that just shows you.
So-
the individual posts.
What you're most likely seeing is this line, because that's the only thing that's talked to it. And basically it's your local address and all the things that talk to it. The other interesting piece that you have here, I used 4 files, so there were 4 files that were involved that it looked at. So this IP address in 4 different files was talked to by these IPs.
So is there also a tool to do like, say like, reverse DNS lookup for all those IPs to kind of show you
So-
what you can do in Wireshark?
By default, it will attempt to do DNS resolution.
Mm.
These are private IP addresses that aren't defined in anything, so there's no resolution that they do, so they don't get names. So yes, by default it will do that, and you can tell it not to. Much like you can with TCP dump, where you give it an N, and then an N, and then another N, and you can suppress it from showing things.
Yeah, I'm not seeing. It's just all IP addresses. It's not.
So I just ran RA across it,
Mhm.
and it's resolving ports, so you're getting names based on that.
I have a question. Can Argus, so I know you said it takes data from like a attacker standpoint. Can it take actual just direct Netflow data? I don't know if you would really need to.
Yes, it can actually. There are some things that you have to do, but it does support version 5 and version 9 of Netflow. So you can use the same tool to run across stored data, but it does have to have been processed slightly ahead of time. So yes, you can. You can also take and run a TCP dump directly at it. So you can do a full packet capture, then you can run Argus across that TCP dump and extract out the metadata. Yes.
I guess I meant, yeah, I meant reverse DNS lookup, so not like resolving the IP for the DNS. I mean, getting the name of whatever IP you're going to.
Doing a lookup of it. Yes.
Then taking the IP address and returning a DNS
Yeah.
name.
So by default it does that, right? If there's a DNS server that knows what it is. So this is a 10.0.1, and it's doing reverse lookups. Some of these I might have thought it would have done.
It doesn't look like it did any of those.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It's like I went to google.com and you'd think it would resolve that, but.
You will find.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
So you have to do the.
So there is a base config, and by default it is doing no lookups except for port lookups, and that's using its local services file. And so in this case, doing the 3 N's, which is like kind of reverse of what you would think about in TCP dump, it will actually do that. But by default, with no configuration like that, it does lookups. I always wanted one host, not many hosts. But it doesn't look like RA hosts. That just gives you the IPs. You could take it and then process it after.
Can you take the RA hosts that you just did and it gives back a list of hosts? Can you break that out and show like number of connections with each?
So, no, not for this.
Okay.
So,
I mean, because that can be interesting, like looking at top talkers and things like that.
and actually there are some great tools to pull top talkers.
And if I'm derailing you, please follow on.
No, it's all good.
What is that place again? I know you saw it.
How's the Donkey Kong flavor?
I know that Frank Drake mentioned something this week in his podcast. It's like Chamberlain. It seemed pretty cool. Yeah.
I had to write it
So
down.
what is it? Open host? Yeah.
Top talkers, RA cluster.
Yep.
And okay, that makes sense. And that gives you the top 15 squawkers.
Yeah, they had that
Yep.
breaks too.
So, basically, what you have here is RA sort, which does exactly what you think. It sorts based on some set of criteria. And in this case is the load of the source. So S load, where it's coming from and how much traffic it's getting. So it's sorting it into an order where you're going to get your top talkers. From this file, there's this -W is used in a lot of things to write something out. So in like TCP dump, a -W, and then you give it a file name and it'll store it there. The same thing with Argus. So if we put a file name there, it's going to write it out to disk, and then we can go and look at it again. But the dash that's here, that's actually send it to standard output. So it would actually send it to the screen, which allows you to pipe it using the pipe symbol, which is the shift \, and then run it through another tool. And this one is RA, which is our traditional one. We're just looking at them, and capital N says give me the 15. So if we now run that, we're going to get the top 15 flow talkers. There are some ways that you can cluster things together so that you're looking at packets. So let's say our criteria is just straight up packets. We can do that with a clustered command. And let's see if I have that one here.
That tends to be the place that I start when I'm looking at capture data, is what's the noisiest thing on the network or in the capture.
And then how to go home to get my laptop.
So now, you're looking more at your top 10, and this is an ARMON, so it sees a lot of the same packets. But you can go in there and you can pull down those top talkers. That was source address. I think. Yeah. So RA cluster is another of the RA tools, and it does it's kind of what it sounds like. It clusters together data based on criteria that you give it. ARMON and I had to look this up because I didn't honestly know, because I'm not a 100% network guy, but it's unidirectional remote network monitoring protocol. It's a certain way of looking at data that network monitoring itself does, like just straight packet network monitoring. So this RA cluster clusters it using the ARMON model, and then it clusters on the number of packets. So it aggregates all those packets per IP address. The -R again is let's read the file. -W writes to standard input again. And then we haven't talked about filters, but this is a filter command, and it's filtering for only IP packets. There are certain packets that are in there, certain flows that are in there that are part of its manual process that it uses to process things. And so we want to extract that out and just look at the IP traffic.
Well, and you also get like layer 2 broadcast noise and all that.
Yeah, you certainly can. So if you don't want to see ARP requests as part of what your top talkers are, although hopefully you're not getting ARP requests on your external interface.
Well, when you put it that way.
But yes, you do want to keep a lot of that out. We pipe it again, and this is the top 10. So you can see.
So you got source and destination there, and then it's the very next entry is the very top entry. You got a source and destination pair. The very next entry is the same thing reversed.
Yep, so that's Armon. So when you're looking at the top talkers, when you're looking at it in that manner, it basically duplicates the traffic the other direction, because you have two-way traffic.
Right.
And so because of the way this was generated, you're going to see them as their pairs, the 5 to the 30, 5 to the 30 for that packet. And that, but if it was more like real network traffic, you would see the external addresses jump up, or you would see the internal host that is getting talked to the most by a whole bunch of different stuff. It just so happens that this data is relatively flat as far as network traffic goes, so you don't necessarily see what you would on a real wire. But yeah, if we
Kaza, wow.
what's that?
The port up there is Kaza, and just woof.
Now we're just looking at packet flows. So.
Whoa. What'd you touch?
Touch nothing. Do you guys want to try and do a real-time monitor while we hit some of your IP addresses? Whoa. All right. So if you'll go back and stop your Argus process. Right. We want to change one thing on a config file. So if you edit, however you like to edit, I like VI. Leaf pad is here.
Do we have any Emacs in the house?
Yeah.
We can file
Don't
open.
need Emacs at the moment.
There's always somebody.
There is.
If you go,
I used to fight with the VI users, so. Ask them if they upgraded so it would save on some tablets.
so argus.conf is the one you want to edit. And the value we're looking for is Argus monitor. We want to we can use anything we want there for this, but give the Argus monitor an ID.
What's the location as well?
Etsy, and it's argus.conf. The other thing we want is to give it a port, and in this case 561, so Argus access port. And then save it. If we start Argus again,
Oh, security was
all right. Does anybody need help with that? Edit?
Do you have this stuff somewhere? Because I'm not gonna remember all the companies.
Yeah, I'm gonna share the sheet and everything
Okay.
after this. So one thing you can do with Argus, we gave it a monitor port and we gave it a port number 561. We can actually tell it with a capital S to go listen to an IP address and a port number, and in this case it's 127.0.0.1 because there's no place like home.
You can't use like localhost?
You could.
You can or no?
You can, if it's defined in your. But what this does is it actually turns and allows you to watch what traffic's coming in live. So this is the traffic that's hitting me on here, and actually you can see 74.125. That's Google.
Somebody poke him with a sharp stick.
So that's a good question.
Who are you?
I'm 10.0.1.196.
And we never could have told that from the packet capture above.
No, but what we were gonna do.
Injecting ping.
Sorry.
I now have port 80 open, so if somebody wants to browse to that, let me pull up our monitor again.
Nobody's brave enough to browse to Jeff's computer.
Say the IP again?
10.0.1.196. If you watch the packet capture, it's the one that's the most common.
What is that? 10 dot. What is the CIDR of that?
For a
Hard.
The CIDR mask.
I mean, it's probably a /24, but
That's what I was talking about.
That's what I was.
hey, you 10.01/24. There you go. There you go. I mean, I don't know if that's going to show you anything different than what you were looking at. Ah, there you go.
And it still doesn't. It doesn't give me what I want, but that's okay. So did anybody?
So what, 10.0.1.
There you go.
Hello.
Somebody's talking.
That's a beautiful web server you got there.
Isn't it great?
Thanks.
10.190.
That's me.
So. Why don't you kick off a Hydra scan of me?
Hopefully.
Do you? I
You keep touching things.
I,
I'm just running InMap right now. I can't remember all the Hydra stuff.
oh, when I crashed myself.
Damn it, Jeff.
It's fantastic. I didn't do so well with the demo gods today.
Should have sacrificed a larger chicken.
Maybe a goat would have worked better. Alright, SSH is running.
You run your Argus.
I think it crashed to Google Hangout too.
Yeah, I think it did,
Took everything out.
unfortunately. Where are we at time-wise?
8:15.
Yeah. 15 more minutes and we'll wrap up.
Yeah. So that didn't go quite as well as I would have liked, but I do have some samples that I will share with the group, and the notes that I didn't print out that actually have some of the ways to run the commands. But in general, you can filter based on a lot of the criteria within there. So you can filter based on IP addresses. You can filter based on networks. You can filter based on protocols. you can do SYN and ACK flags, and I actually have some of the samples in there that will give you, show me all the SYN packets. If you're getting a SYN storm or a SYN flood, and you want to look and see, you can identify that because you're going to have a lot of SYNs with a very, very, very
Really neat. I've never even thought about doing that, but that makes perfect sense.
one of the things that I really, I can show really quick here.
What's he doing?
She got 2 gigs on there? I'm just curious.
An example.
So,
Bang.
so this this first packet capture, Argus 1, had a lot of Nmap going on in it, and you can see from the same address, we're getting different ports here. And it's just kind of mapping. We're getting, what you'll find here are all resets, so those ports aren't open.
Yeah, mine is old. Well, it's an African.
But as you start to go down, eventually.
Right later.
SSH.
This was actually an SSH brute force. So coming in ports, it's just jumping ports from the same host, and it's sending what's a little harder to see here, but over and over and over, 9 packets, all the same size. Those are its attempts to try and do password guessing, and then do another session, and then do more password guessing. And I will put out there some, but in the -4, Argus -4, there's actually a successful brute force where it gets a password, and then I immediately pivot from there and log in with that information from somewhere else. So the traffic in there can be used to look and try and determine if you've had a state change between just being, somebody trying to brute force you, and then they actually got passwords and started logging in. And that we do that a lot, looking after a host has been compromised to try and identify when it was compromised.
That was one of the things I thought was really interesting on Risky Business, I think 2 weeks ago. One of the sponsors came on and was talking about they do pen testing, and they gathered metrics on their pen testing engagement, like 100 pen testing engagements, and brute forcing was the most common way of moving laterally. Once they got in, like, they would get somebody to click a phishing link or something and load derpy software on a desktop somewhere, and then it's just brute force and crawl across the network. And like 100% of the time when they got ownership of a box on the network, they were able to take total ownership of the entire network. Like, they got domain admin creds and GG. So that's actually really useful, relevant data if you can prove when a host was compromised.
Yes. So, thank you. Sorry for crashing everything a couple times.
It's okay, Jeff.
Any other questions?
Are there any tools that'll go through and parse like an Argus file and look for like known bad IP addresses, like a threat type deal? Or is it manual or just building your own scripts?
At this point, it's build your own scripts. There are on the wiki for Argus, there are a couple of people who have written up scripts to look at some of the not ransomware, but some of the old, like Zeus and some of those brands of malware and where they would call back to and what they would do. It is really interesting. Unfortunately, if they embed themselves into an AWS instance or an Azure instance, you start to lose the ability really to understand where they went. You may have the IP addresses, but you have no idea if it was a good part of AWS or something that was compromised. And because they move things around so much, there's a good chance you may have IP addresses, but the URL or the domain, that web address resolved to a different IP address at the time of the attack than what you're able to look up now. So one of the best things that you can have in addition to this is to have DNS data, so that you can say this client looked up this IP address and got, or looked up this domain and got this IP address at this point in time. And then you can come back into Argus and you can know for sure where they went. Because, you know, if they go to ESPN instead of badactor.ru that happens to be hosted at the same place on the same IP address, then, you know, it's really difficult to find out what happened.
Are there tools to go through and identify this behavior where you see attempt 10,000 times and then, hey, look, success? Because, I mean, that's not normal behavior, right? No sane sysadmin is going to sit there and bang away at something 10,000
Yes.
times and then, oh, look, I finally typed my password right.
That's where some of the regex sort of things would probably come in handy. That's also where you mentioned visual tools. Visual tools are going to help you find that a whole lot easier, more easily than these patterns. Because, you know, as an analyst, you're looking and you can see, oh, this doesn't look right. As far as behavioral analysis, there is some that's going on. There were a couple projects out of Stanford that, again, didn't get a whole lot of traction, especially when you can do something like that using an IDS a little bit more easily. So this wouldn't be your one-stop tool that you would
Right.
use to do everything,
Yeah.
but it can be something you can use to have greater visibility into your network. We can't TCP dump everything. We can't for a couple of reasons. One, we don't have storage, and two, we don't necessarily have the permission to just capture all packets and go inspect them. So, and I would assume in many industries, you don't want to be full packet capturing your communications to the bank. You know. Maybe
So-
you do, maybe you don't.
So from a legal stance, though, is it collecting metadata? I know, like the NSA says, "Oh no, we're not capturing everything. We're just collecting metadata."
Yeah.
So as far as like a personal thing, is it legal to, if you're not doing like full packet captures, you're just doing?
That would depend. Honestly,
Yeah.
it would depend on the situation because quite frankly, there are enough laws out there that it can become.
If you're talking about in a professional setting in your day job, consult your lawyers. There's no way around it. You've got to consult your legal team and find out what you can do as a company. You may be able to do full packet capture. Like, you may tell your employees when they walk in the door, look, everything you do on this network is subject to our monitoring and observation. You may be in a situation like Jeff where you've got people that just walked in off the street that are on your network, and if you capture all of their data, you are violating their rights and you are subject to legal action. There is no way to navigate that without talking to your legal
And
team and working through it.
On the other side of it is perhaps when somebody walks into your house and says, "Can I connect to your Wi-Fi?" You tell them you can, but you're going to, I'm doing full packet capture, or I'm doing packet capture of some sort. So you're welcome to join this, but if you choose not to, then, you know, sorry.
Say that on your authentication portal.
But so the question then becomes, so let's say you're monitoring, but you open up a unencrypted guest Wi-Fi access point, and you allow anybody walking by to connect to it, and you do full packet capture of that. that's an entirely different legal question than is everybody who walked in the door I gave a password to and I made them sign my agreement that I could packet capture. And even that could run
Wouldn't
into
that be,
issues.
so connecting to your network without your permission, though, wouldn't that be violating the CFAA?
Potentially.
So,
Yeah.
if, even if you're doing packet capture.
It's up to the company, man. Yeah, it really is.
It's going to be any situation, but
The
I
problem
think-
is none of that's legally well defined, right?
Yeah.
It's very gray space.
So just overall, be very cautious of what you packet capture and what you hear. Because
If you
the
own
worst-
it, you know, if you own it, it's yours.
Right. I mean, if you throw up free hacker Wi-Fi in Starbucks and let whichever 15 people connect to it, start
Joshua
surfing
Wright
Facebook.
wrote a cool distro. It was called I Love My Neighbors. And so he would open up his Wi-Fi and people would connect to his neighbor's Wi-Fi. And he would do all kinds of things like take their search and replace their Google image search with all ASCII art, and would basically do all these things, just kind of keep hammering at people that would connect to his Wi-Fi.
My favorite thing in
picture.
You want to do something fun like that.
My favorite thing with that vein is the upside down internet.
Yeah.
The router distro where if people connect to it, it flips every page upside down.
Sure, why not? Make all your Google search Bing searches and all
That's just
Dude,
wrong,
that
right?
should be subject to criminal penalty right there. Okay, just saying.
I will make the slides available and I'll put some more stuff together. You should get that. And thank you very much.
Thank you all for coming.